Welcome, wildflowers. I urge you to be present in a way that could allow you to be taken beyond what you're expecting. Anything you might expect, really. I'm doing the same. I'm going to avoid my go-to sternness. It's a space I think I occupy when I'm trying to be with the resolve it takes to do the work I do. But there's a level deeper of vulnerability that I need to be present with today. I was awake a lot in the night. I will not be able to do lightning sessions today. I know when I'm in this space, it's not best for me to hold space for others in such a way. And I am definitely supposed to do this. I'm supposed to channel. Today will involve more channeling. Consider that there is an intelligence, the Kaiyan mind. It weaves together every significant force, including all that is no longer acceptable or wanted. Most of what is no longer acceptable or wanted is essentially of the karmic ocean. It means a karmically based way of being, of which there are many, that the earth is now designating as pure compost. No longer going to hold space for it. In the past, there has been space for it. The why is complex. You can look through our old channelings, our old classes, everything. The reality is now is a pivotal turning point. It's happening. To understand what's happening, first of all, it's possible to understand what's happening. Forgive me, I'm going to do this. I can't see who's here, but I really need to let go of a sense of performance today. Like, I might stumble more. I'll pause more than ever. A lot is dying right now. It's happening on a spiritual plane that is certainly being felt. Most importantly, people's ideas of this reality are dying. Now, this is crucial because our ideas about reality exist. Our ideas are the building blocks of creation. So when we come up with an idea, we're creating a framework of reality. And then to the extent it fits in the world, it begins to have more influence. And to the extent it contradicts, if we have an idea that contradicts what the earth herself is creating, then we get relegated to a different relationship to reality. And essentially, what's happening right now is we were given a broader range of permission to have all sorts of ideas. Now they're getting more explicitly channeled together. And in some cases, that is to end them. There's a zero tolerance policy happening. And I want you to understand this. First, I'll be generic, then I might get more specific. Stop identifying with your categories. Period. You have some energy. It's red, it's orange, it's yellow. You have that energy. It's not what you are, it's something you have. This is pivotal. To the extent you identify the energy that you're born into, which translates to your race, you're a hue man of color. The energy, the core energy of your race is not what you are. It's not who you are. It is something you have. It's something you're essentially wearing in this life. Now you're cultivating it, you're learning from it. There are karmic reasons you are where you are, but you must make this change. It's just, there's no negotiation on this. If you don't, you're going to get channeled into a compost pile, maybe faster than you think. You got to identify as the being who incarnated into physical form. Period. There are no exceptions to this. You don't get to write the story like your race is somehow better, more victimized, more beholden, more anything, nothing. If you're making excuses for those who are like your energy, when they make egregious violations, and if you're attacking and disparaging others, you are making a very simple mistake you must understand now. It is a gateway. It is an initiation. It is a locked wall until you get this. You cannot displace the energy of negativity that people who look like you create and put it on other people. You can't. Now, the reason I'm able to do this is I had to face this young. So I'm going to go through this probably quickly. I've said it, but I need to keep saying it. It's part of my service. It's part of my karmic healing. It's part of my humility. I was born into one of the most privileged positions on the planet. My great-grandfather on my father's side, my 7 great-grandfather on my father's side was on the Boston Tea Party. He's buried with Sam Adams. He was the sheriff of Boston. He has the same name as my father. My great-great-grandfather on my mother's side was a racist bishop who tried to keep black people out of his cathedral or whatever the fuck it was. Sued to the Supreme Court to keep anyone who wasn't white out of his church. I inherited this. I had to learn to reject, identifying fundamentally with my heritage. And get how this works. I had to learn to reject fundamentally identifying with my heritage in order to be given back to my life. So I was then given back to my life as I was born into it with the responsibility to channel these energies. So it didn't fundamentally break what I inherited. I still have roots. But I bring my energy to the table and I say, I am someone with this energy who is bringing it to a potluck. We're here to create a rainbow. I will never say I am better than orange or yellow or purple or whatever the color is. I will say, if you don't do the same thing, you're not getting through the door. When people who look like you are violent, hateful, rape, murder, you can't say, well, I understand why they were so angry. They were so angry because those guys did that. Love is the only way. Thou shalt love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your mind, and all your soul. This is the first and greatest commandment. And the second is like unto it. Thou shalt love thy neighbor as thyself. I have been talking with Jesus for a long time. I was born into a Christian church that I came to reject because the other people who looked like me, thought like me, prayed like me, were poisoned. When I found out these were the same people who blamed their rebellion on Native Americans, think about that. Oh, bold and noble revolutionary that my 7 great-grandfather was, he dressed up like a Native American. He didn't say, I am Joseph Shedd, I refuse the English. They dressed up like Native Americans. When you look at your heritage, you have to stare directly into what they are. But you are not your heritage. As long as you don't take it like you're something special, as long as you just accept it as a responsibility, I was born into this, you're invited through the gate. This is true of everybody. Muslim or Christian, poet or pope, preacher or poet, who was it wrote? Give any one species too much rope and they'll fuck it up. You were probably here 250 years ago. Who were you? Who were you? You can't make it through this gate unless you accept the depth of impact of this statement. Who were you? If you are identifying as your race, and you're making excuses for your heritage, and you're feeding on the blessings of your heritage, what if you were of the race that your heritage abused 250 years ago? Take any form. What if 1,000 years ago? It gets pushed to the absurd. If we explored the roots of most people on earth, the most self-righteous, angry people right now may well have been incarnate as the race they hate. This goes for everybody. This goes for everybody. The way this is done is sorting compost. Kaiya is sorting compost. And she's saying, ignore your race. It's about attitude. Do you love your neighbor? Do you try to love your neighbor? Or do you identify your neighbor by the worst excesses of several people in their race and then block out everything else and just try to hide from what's happening in the world? Just apply this. It's not hard. No story is exceptional in this regard. Not the Jews, not the Muslims, not the Russians, not the Canadians, not the Americans, not the Native Americans. Native Americans in my local region, you know, when they got their hand on guns, they killed other Native Americans quite frequently. There are very few peoples on the earth who are an exception to this. And guess what? In my experience, those who are an exception to this, those who do have more of a history of peacefulness, not particularly judgmental about the rest of us. They don't use the same kind of self-righteous aggression. Self-righteous aggression is almost always a symptom of displacement, which means people like me, people who look like me, pray like I was taught to pray, they do things and they justify them. And when they justify them, I would sort of be like, yeah, I understand why you think that way. It's a terribly accessible attitude when people look like you and pray like you. Right now in the United States, it's super easy to apply. There's a tremendously abusive criminal justice system. You don't even have to scratch the surface of society to find that many normal seeming people are basically saying, I want you to lock up people who look scary to me. Well, it's justified because they're scared when they walk down the street and pass someone. I remember going to a local park in my town. There was a man there who was clearly not from here. He was very intense. And I heard him talking to other people who looked like him, and they didn't look like me. And, you know, on the surface. And he was describing that he was a creature of the concrete jungle. And I was scared. I felt fear. And I, on purpose, sat there. On purpose, I sat there and breathed through the fear because I knew that my fear does not give me a right to dominate or control him. And I would say most people probably don't do what I did. Most people probably don't do that work. And at some point, I did a lot of yoga in the same place. And some of the same people were sitting there talking. And I felt the same kind of fear. Now, they weren't with this more extreme person who claimed he grew up in the concrete jungle. But I felt the same kind of fear. I could hear their voices. They were harsher than mine. I could hear their music. It was louder than I was comfortable with. I kept doing yoga. And at a certain point, the music calmed down and I heard one of them say, I want to learn that. To sit with your fears and be in their presence is very challenging. To sit with them and be in their presence and not hold conclusions in direct reaction to fear. Now, here's the stunning thing about this is it is so palpably obvious when people make decisions based in fear. It's not vague when people make decisions based in fear. Energetically, it's super obvious. It's just kind of like, does that have a black marker on it or not? Like, and forgive the the choice of tone, you know. The energetic presence of a fear-based reaction blocks the light. That's why black becomes a decent metaphor sometimes. It blocks the light. But it seems super practical in your mind when you make a decision like that. Well, they're really intense. I feel fear. I should avoid them. They're really intense. I feel fear. Maybe we should call the police and tell them they should, be walking through this park more often. But correlation is not causation. Just because you feel fear and just because someone else who looked like that once behaved in a way that was violent doesn't mean you get to presume that person might be violent. That's what you bring to the table. It's called projection. And then if you add to that a displacement, so someone who does look like you, does something awful, but you can relate to them. They don't scare you as much because they look like you and they probably wouldn't do that to you. There was an incident that happened in my hometown over 10 years ago. It was quite a while ago. Two kids grew up in this town, and they were both known to be pot dealers. Over time, there was insinuation that they dealt other things, but they were both known to be pot dealers in high school. One actually grew up and became a cop in town. He shot and killed the other. Nothing happened to him. He was never brought under charges. He was exonerated as it was necessary. It's not an extreme puzzle for me to suggest that you question which was what race. This is work. This is painful work. It's more difficult than almost anything because it strikes at the heart of your identity and it forces you to rip up your root. And I would suggest that most people aren't willing to do it on purpose. But some of you have been forced to do it. Your root has been ripped apart. You were abused within your families in a way that ripped your root apart. And I invite you to realize in a certain deeply painful way, this is a sacred gift. Because when someone in your family violates you, it rips your root apart in a manner that gives you access to realize the truth of this world. Because we're trying to make a rainbow. And if you had a relatively decently adjusted life with no abuse in the family, it is extremely likely you would have gotten channeled into traditional patterns in which you would essentially be partly accountable for abusive racist dynamics in the world. And look, let's not fight over words. If you decide that some other category is something, whatever you want to call it, that's not okay. Now, I do think that there's a difference when you are part of a dominant category. If your race is dominant, then the misuse of power from a place of dominance is its own thing. But if you're turning around and just hating, you're still hating. At the end of the day, this is simple. Hatred's based in fear. Fear is not love. If you don't base your choices in love, you're not getting through the gate. I'm heartbroken by this right now, and yet I'm extremely hopeful because I know that what's happening right now is a force that's been sent through to surge through the world to break, to shatter our roots. My roots already been broken. I know how to handle it. In fact, I've gone several steps, several journeys beyond that. I've just been waiting for a lot of y'all to catch up. Now be at peace with the objective truth of your situation. You have the challenge you have. Public opinion doesn't mean anything. Public opinion doesn't mean a lick. We're coming out of a world of karmic reality in which people have been taught on so many levels, people have been taught to attempt to get other people to believe their story. And those who are most capable of getting others to believe their story gain power because they have others believing their story. I was taught to discredit this system. I was taught to rip myself bare, to go into the wilderness of the world and let myself get ripped bare, let myself be stripped of my heritage and the protections it accorded me, and just say what? Just say what to reality. And I was given the work I've been given to do. And then I was given back my heritage and my root and the powers of this. And yet I'm still loath to rely upon anybody else's opinion of me, because if I rely on your opinion of me, I've been concerned I'm feeding into the same karmic system, right? And I'm being invited to assert my path, specifically so you could recognize the medicine you need. My root was shattered over 20 years ago. I was taught how to cope with this shattering and recreate a root. It's still not strong enough. It's not strong enough. A root chakra is explicitly in relation to community on the earth. Explicitly in relation to community on the earth. We have to recreate the world. We have to recreate the whole world together. The roots that we are inheriting are poisoned. They are poisoned in a way that you can't identify clearly until you agree to surrender them. And once you've agreed to surrender them, they're given back to you in a different way. To appreciate this is to be willing to surrender repeatedly. I'm not saying it again and again to make this more difficult for you. It's just what's necessary. Now, would you please breathe with me in your heart? We're guided back to this simplicity. I got to close my eyes. My eyes are tired. We're guided back to this simplicity. I'm going to talk about this now, and I don't entirely want to, but it's what I believe is necessary. Right now is a tipping point of global energetic presence. We're shifting from one fundamental vibration to another. This is mirrored on multiple levels. I've remained largely abstract because when we make things tangible, people get their personal ideas wrapped up in things, and people become resistant in a way that's very frustrating and annoying to deal with. So I've largely relied on attracting people who are capable of applying these thoughts on your own. But some things just don't land unless you make them more personal. Right now, we are coping with a simple shift in power dynamics on the planet, where basically violence is no longer going to win. In fact, violence has already started not to win. The Russians and the Israelis are discovering this. When you're too violent, people are looking at you from every direction saying, that can't be right. You may have had something to be upset about to begin with, but you just escalated in a way that was like pouring lighter fluid on the fire. And yes, you are responsible for what happens when that occurs. To dissect these situations as if they're really special, I think is stupid. None of them are special. When people leave the idea of loving thy neighbor, there's nothing special after that. There's nothing special. And guess what? If you hate the people who left the idea of loving thy neighbor, you're not really better. You're just the underdog. If you won, people who look like you would probably kill them. There's no justice in this. There's no justice in this. This myth that we have a right to celebrate other people's suffering. I don't like laughing when people I disagree with lose. I don't like it. I think on rare occasion, it is uniquely appropriate medicine. But I do not, there's an ick in my experience when I laugh at someone else who is suffering. I don't care if they're a fascist murderer. Of course I want them to lose their power. Of course. But it's not fucking funny. Now, I've struggled for a while with the sense that maybe this humor is an effective tool against fascist power. Like when someone's in power and they're, and to be clear, fascism means you're essentially willing to use your power for whatever you want. So you're not constrained by rules or morals. It's might makes right. And then you apply it systematically and dominate other people into following your way. It's a very appropriate term. You can identify when people are behaving in this way. They want to break morals, they want to break laws, and just be dominant. And it does something to society when anyone attempts to inflict this kind of power. Of course I want them to lose. And I certainly consider that humor might be a necessary ingredient in unseating them. But it still leaves a bad taste in my mouth because I don't want to smile when someone else suffers. This is the depth you need to go to apply loving thy neighbor. This is the depth you need to go to. You don't love your neighbor when you celebrate when they suffer. There's no celebration that's appropriate when others are suffering, in my opinion. Certainly not when your celebration is in direct relation to their suffering. Now, we depart from the past by transcending it. You can't use the same rules of the past and mix and match them and think that you're right. But you also can't judge people who are winning based on rules of the past if you haven't come to terms with your own heritage. When you dig into your roots, you have to look at the ground you rest upon. There is an understandable, deep existential challenge in the United States right now because there are certain forces that have been known to be called liberal, which have been starting to wake up, woke, and recognize how bad it's been here. We were given a bullshit story. America, the land of the free and the brave. And when we question this, it's truly debilitating. And I understand why so many people resent it. It's like, fuck you, you're teaching me to hate being American. I loved being this. And it was wholehearted for many people. It still is. And yet, I urge you to realize, as someone who has some of the deepest roots here for white people, if you don't come to terms with the truth, the reality of how this place was made, you inherit sickness. And I believe there's a direct relationship between the violence in this country, the school shootings, kids going nuts, is in direct relationship to being haunted by the karma of the past. I wonder what would happen if you drew a map of school shootings over the past 30 years and then did a map of Native American mass murders, mass deaths. I wonder if there's a correlation between the regions in which school shootings occur. To be present with the truth is to say, I don't want to feed myself a lie. Understand what we do when we lie to ourselves. When we lie to ourselves, we're essentially taking our positivity and trying to write a story that's stronger than anything else. There could be a tremendously conscious, coherent reason to try to lie to yourself. In fact, it can be almost difficult to realize the difference between lying to yourself and simply trying to create a better world. And what this exposes is the need, the necessity to come up against the edge of truth as it is energetically. Energetically, you could measure how much power do you have to generate a new story. We're not going to call it a lie. We're just going to call it a new story. The reality is you don't have unlimited power to write the story you want to write. If you write a story that does not truly fit the circumstances of your reality, it won't match the energy, and the energy will conflict, and your story will start to deteriorate. And if you double down and attempt to reassert your story and focus on the points that you believe are true and do it again and do it again, you're going to be tapping a needle into your vein and feeding your blood into what is essentially a lie. And it's a lie even when you focus on some details or facts that are true, but you ignore all sorts of other things. If you won, how would people who look like you treat the people they dominate? Because the reality is, it's pretty easy to tell a beautiful story about communist intentions. It's pretty easy. There's great beauty if you look into the roots. They were attempting to address tremendous violations of sanity, moral law. There's no way it was okay for the aristocracies of Russia and China to be as dominant as they were. It was brutal on a level that, spoke to the roots of feudalism for thousands of years. And yet, when they won, they murdered a lot of people. In certain circumstances, they were murdering people just because they had a horse. They turned on wealth itself. You can't justify hatred. There's no model, there's no paradigm that works. You can't justify it. Now, people try to make this complicated, but it's not really complicated. It's honestly not complex. I do not believe you're supposed to sit there and let yourself be abused physically. Energetically, you can measure the extent to which two people who fight are generating aggression. Energetically, you can do this objectively. So just consider, if someone attacks you and they are really the one who's generating aggression, you can make a prayer that their aggression flips back upon itself. Now, this can seem challenging when you're applying it in the real world. It can seem challenging. You could get yourself lost in your mind, making scenarios and thought games with this circumstance and that circumstance. But case to case basis, there's a math to how much aggression is being generated by one person and how much is being generated by another. And I assure you, if you cultivate the imperative, the moral core that says, I will love my neighbor, I will love my neighbor, then when you confront violence with the prayer to love, and yet the prayer that any violence get flipped back upon itself, it will flip back upon itself. But that's not what will happen if you're generating hatred, if you're writing scenarios about how they deserve to get hurt. A man once threatened to kill me. It's happened multiple times. I stared at him with love. A man threatened to kill me. I stared at him with love. And he got knocked out. And I fucking cried. And I cried again. And I could cry now. Because I witnessed him in love. And because I went into that depth where like nothing else was real. If you haven't come close to death, it's hard to navigate these feelings. But if you have, you know what I'm saying. Nothing else existed except the magnetism of death. And I'm staring at him with genuine love, and it flipped back upon itself. And life generated circumstances in which someone else knocked him out brutally. He was bleeding, went to the hospital. And yet I can accept that I was 0% invested in any scenario in which I was somehow a violent hero. I knew Kung Fu. I had no intention of fighting with him physically because I knew that I could go deeper with love. To be present with real love in this way is to know a space from which you can't be taken. You can't be broken. It really works. And dare I say, a lot of you could use considering having a chat with Jesus. He's a really good teacher of this. Oh, and he's deeply present and very capable of talking to you about it. You transcend this life. At a certain point, you can entertain it as a thought process, as like a game, or you can rest in it. You rest in it, you become moderately immune to death. I was scared, but I didn't fuck up my decision-making process based in that fear. Don't believe anyone who says they don't get afraid. You're an idiot if you don't get afraid under such circumstances. Just don't make your decisions based in the fear. I literally put my hand on my heart when I stared at him. And you know what I saw? One of the closest reflections I've ever seen in my life. An absolutely fierce person who didn't want anyone else to dominate them, much like me, believe it or not. And I pray to God every time I think of it, that I somehow was able to present a prayer for love in a way that still reaches him, still blesses him, opening an avenue for another possibility other than fighting with violence. I once had a man move into my home. He'd been living in his car for 20 years. I owned a home and I wanted to share. There were 7 plausible bedrooms. One was not awesome, but it was a space. Hell of a lot better than his car. And when he wanted to move in, he wanted to bring a gun. I was younger. I was 27 or something. And yet I learned one of the most critical lessons of my life because I was able to articulate in the face of his, but I could help protect you. I was able to say, I protect myself far more effectively by coping with my fears on my own. If I imagine someone attacking me and my solution in my imagination is to imagine a gun, I am generating the seed of reality that could attract that to happen. It does work this way. The seeds of reality you generate in your imagination have a fundamental and profound impact on the world. This is much like quantum physics. Quantum scientists can research the patterning of energy that occurs when they annihilate 2 electrons bumping into each other, but they don't get to control it completely. If they focus on one potential result, it is more likely to occur. And reality works the same way. You don't get complete control over shit like this, particularly when it involves violence. But you do have a profound vote. And if you respond to life by viewing life through a lens of fear and then scripting your response to that fear, you are investing heavily in a fear-based reality, which is karmic, which is hateful, and which is very likely to flip back on you. If you simplify the process entirely by praying for love, you don't script this shit. I did not script what happened with him. I said, when I face this fear, may I face it with love. May I face it with the courage to love and help change it as effectively as possible. That was my prayer. I held it for years. I cannot count the number of times I faced violent situations with that one prayer. And it worked because that's what I prayed for. Over and over and over again, I made the same prayer. I didn't script hate. And I was prepared to be sad that an individual had fallen in pain in front of me. Because, damn it, I would have preferred to reach him with love without the violence. We're looking at a world that's falling apart right now. In so many ways, in so many places. Somebody commented that maybe in the United States, that's what's happening. I think it's happening in more places than just the United States. Certainly the global ecosystems are falling apart. There is no prediction about what could be happening year to year, month to month these days. And yes, I do believe it's far more volatile than it used to be in many, many ways. And one of the core consistencies amidst this chaos is that people's old way of life is being ripped apart. And when your old way of life is ripped apart, it's having a fundamental impact on your root chakra. If you anticipate this process, if you respond to this process by saying, help me aim for a more loving, rainbow-based root chakra. Help me aim to identify with those who are aiming to identify with a loving world. It's so simple. You don't pray for everybody who looks like you. You don't make excuses for anybody who looks like you. You pray for everybody who's praying for a rainbow. And you bring what you are to this rainbow. And you are more like people who are blue and people who are yellow who are praying to bring blue and yellow to the rainbow, whether you're red, orange, or purple. You are more like those who bring their energy to the rainbow. And you've got to become this. And this is not, oh, it sounds like a beautiful rainbow prayer, right? Like fairies and unicorns or something. Fiercest prayer on the planet can rip your life to shreds. But for most of you, that's probably already happening, right? For many of you, that has already happened. And we're talking about how to recreate a new root without hatred, without resentment. In fact, with a bizarre, I don't know that I would say gratitude, but an appreciation for the fact that the root you were born into is unacceptable. And every excuse you make for the root you were born into is an avoidance of the core truth. If you come from a victimized people, if you were dominant, if people who looked like you were dominant, how would they behave? Would they be more loving than the people who are currently dominant? There's this guy Erdogan. He's the prime minister of Turkey. He's basically taken over with power. There was a coup against him several years ago. I voted for it to fail in my heart because I don't believe Turkey going into chaos and many people murdering each other the way they did in Syria or Libya would be a benefit to the world. It's easy to identify violations, egregious violations of justice, but be careful how you pray for them to change. If you list in your head all the violations of power that people in power are making, and you let the hatred brew and let the hatred brew and let the hatred brew, don't think you'd be an exception if you were in charge or if people who look like that are in charge. They just kill. That's what happens every time. If you don't base your dreams in love, same shit happens every time. And there ain't a story on the planet that's an exception to this. Muslim or Christian, poet or pope, preacher, Muslim or Christian, poet or pope, preacher or pope. No, there's no two poets in there. I got to remember it. It's a Roger Waters quote. Somebody correct me. Welcome. 43 minutes, huh? I'm tired as hell. I'm going to do 1 minute breathing in my heart. This is my yoga today. Don't mean to shock you, but I do invite you to join me. And if you leave now, please don't. A minute of breath in your heart is one of the simplest ways you can pray to shift into a loving world possible. When I look into the future, I see a lot of beauty. I see a lot of love because that's what I put there. I do fear that I'm being naive sometimes. I do, upon occasion, wonder if these cycles of violence will go on forever. I don't have absolute faith in the path I'm taking, but it's certainly strong enough that it grabs me back, brings me back with grace most of the time now. Every time I reach for Thoth, he's here for me. Every time I reach for Jesus, he's here for me. Again and again, it works. And I have to keep doing it. It's hard. They've asked me to do this work, and so I do the best I know how to do. And sometimes I want more respect, and sometimes I'm angry at who gets credibility and even attention in the world, believing that I have far more to offer, for sure. It's not too hard for me to set down my ego in this regard these days. Hasn't been for a while. Every time I get twice as many views on a video, I get so many assholes. Somebody just, do you suck cock? Maybe others have an easier time navigating such comments. It's hard for me. It hurts. The truth of the matter is, I was raped as a child. And my gifts are intrinsically, there's no way for me to know who I would be if that hadn't happened. In the society I was raised in, just saying this seems to, let's just say I was raised with a very strong sense of, oh God, America just sucks in so many ways. To accept vulnerability as a man was not very present or uplifted. And it's been a gigantic struggle to come to terms with this. And every step I've taken, it's actually benefited me more to be vulnerable than not. But when I do it, I have to confront all sorts of shit that it is very unpleasant. And yet I'm here to say, I know some of you. I know there are multiple men who are here who have been violated, raped, molested, and haven't said it. I know you. Maybe not for sure, but I sense it. And to build a world in which we break the model of masculinity, which suggests that we're immune, we're invulnerable, is not to break a male-female pattern. It's to break an old way and accept a new way. I know as many women who will degrade a man for being vulnerable as men. This is not a sexist dynamic. When I first shared a Me Too post, I shared a Me Too post during the movement. I had told 6, perhaps, that I'd been molested. And then the Me Too movement swept through, and I made a public post on Facebook. I got significant pushback from women who told me to shut up. And I ask you, those of you who care about me, to appreciate that there are a lot of men who are utterly terrified for multiple reasons. There is a unique form of suffering that white men even go through because there just ain't a hell of a lot of support for it. Forgive me, for those of you with different skin color, perhaps it isn't much different. But I'd suggest that we're kind of put last on a certain level, understandably, because people who looked like this have done so many bad things. But it's all bullshit. It's all artificial. Suffering is suffering. And at the end of the day, if you can't cry and you can't say you're afraid, you're gonna rest in anger. And a lot of people who've been abused, a lot of white men who've been abused, rest in anger because they don't know how to change it. I have not been good enough at changing it. I have not been good enough. And recently I've been feeling myself get angry in response to challenges on a level that I just don't accept. And I've found tears pretty accessible in those moments. And it's mental. It feels awkward. It's like a head trip. But when I shift to focus on it, when I just say, I am so sad that I'm feeling this anger. I am so sad that I'm angry again, which is like pouring gasoline on a fire. That's a prayer to change it. In my country, in my demographics, I know a lot of people who identify as liberal who basically feel like we can't make changes because these other conservative people, whatever they fucking label themselves as, because these other people block it. No one can stop you from crying. No one can stop you from feeling vulnerable. They can react against you. They can shame you. They can get in your head. They can form you in a way that you're afraid of. But you can break it. And to commit to the truth of who you are absolutely starts and continues with owning your feelings, owning your emotions, owning all of the energy you make. And it's an absolute gateway. If you attempt to identify as anything less than you are, you can't get through. If you attempt to identify as anything less than you are, you can't get through. So if you've been violated, you have to find some degree of peace with it. And you have to be more committed to people who love you and appreciate you for being vulnerable than you are attempting to posture for those who would shame you for your vulnerability, would think less of you for your vulnerability. To be present with this is to know that there is a better way. There is a better way. Sometimes you might not remember it. Sometimes you might not be able to feel it, but it exists. It exists even when you can barely breathe. And it absolutely does start with love in your heart. It really can be this simple as the reseed, to return to a seed of where you need to be. To find your heart, feel it, breathe with it, and just refuse to invest in the thoughts and the hatreds and the fears. You still live with them. Hatred might even sweep through you, certainly fear, anger, but you just don't invest in it. You don't make your life with that as your costume. You don't justify it in others. You don't respond to it in others as a way of masking your own pain. There's this phenomena I urge you to be highly sensitized to of hiding your shadow, where basically you are dependent on the world being a worse place. Because if there were not worse people around, everyone else, we would all see you. We'd all see your shadow. What you can watch in your mind. Do you ever justify your behavior by saying, well, that person's worse than me? Well, I'm better than that. I would suggest to you that many, many people are lost in these dynamics. To be present with yourself apart from judgment, apart from relative understanding. So you're not knowing yourself in relation to other people. You're letting go of an identity that's externally driven. I learned to do these. My root was shattered so completely when I confronted my trauma, being molested. My root shattered so completely that I just didn't give a shit anymore. It's a strange gift. It's a strange gift. And I was ripped so raw that I had to recreate myself. And to my credit, did a pretty good job. I prayed a lot. I put health first. I put singing and dancing, climbing trees first. And to be present with what matters most about being in a body, living on earth, is to give yourself your own heart? Are you making excuses? Are you sacrificing your heart because it seems to make sense, because you have to, because you're afraid? I urge you to realize that this is not a time when caution is going to work under many circumstances. Being true to yourself is survival itself. Because when you know your heart will be here for you at the very edge of sanity, in the deepest of fears, in the most overwhelming of rages. And when your heart is here for you in such times, you'll make the right choices. You'll make the right choices. I pray that you do. I'm sorry I can't do readings today, and I'll see you soon.